DSHEA became like an open opportunity for people to start marketing dietary supplements with some type of regulatory acceptance. Dietary supplements became legal. Herbs were considered dietary supplements. There was a lot of resistance at FDA, by the way, for herbs. They were okay with vitamins. They were okay with minerals. They were not so necessarily okay with amino acids, but not as much as herbs. They just didn't like herbs at all. They thought there were just too many of them. They didn't know how to standardize the quality or even understand the quality because they were so chemically variable. And herbs had been used historically as medicines, which is where we get the word drug originally, which means dried plant, from the word droog in Dutch, which means dry. The word drought has the same origin. Originally, drugs were dried plants saved for later use as medicines. So FDA would consistently saw herbs as a form of unapproved medicine. And under the regulatory regime at the time, there was no pathway to get even simple herbs allowed for their traditional use or based on modern research, unless they were going through a new drug application, which at the time, when we were writing articles in the 80s and early 90s, would cost something like $50 million to get a new drug approved. And that was untenable because these things were, in many cases, were not patentable, and nobody was going to spend that kind of money to prove that chamomile helps upset stomach or is a mild sleep aid when people knew traditionally that you can use it. And, of course, what happened with Peter Rabbit, when he ate all the carrots in Farmer McGregor's carrot patch, he came home with an upset tummy. And in the book, we see a picture of Mrs. Rabbit coming with a pot of chamomile tea for Peter while he's sitting in bed or laying in bed with an upset tummy. And so we have a documentation in the literature, if you will, that chamomile tea is probably good for upset stomach. But you can make a claim to market chamomile tea for upset stomach under the regulatory regime at the time. One of the things that DSHEA did was it allowed for structure function claims, which is a non-drug, non-therapeutic claim that shows how the vitamin, the mineral, the herb, the amino acid affects the structure or function of the body. This comes from the Food and Drug Law, where they define a drug as an article other than food that affects the structure or function of the body. By saying that a drug is an article other than food that affects the structure or function of the body, the presumption is, in the definition, that food also affects the structure or function of the body. And since dietary supplements are technically foods, not drugs, it opened the door for reasonable, scientifically available and documentable claims to be made if they show how that herb can affect the structure or function of the body. So that opened up at least some limited amount of claims, which really opened up a lot of the eyes of consumers. So you had to the benefits of herbs, at least at a limited level. So you could say that saw palmetto can help maintain a happy prostate, but you couldn't say that saw palmetto can help treat the symptoms of benign prostatic hyperplasia, because that would be a drug claim, basically, under the FDA. So there's got to be some kind of languaging issue. What happened was a lot of these structure function claims became opportunities to try to communicate to consumers by using very carefully worded language. It's the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act. One of the key issues was the continued access to supplements, because prior to the passage of DSHEA, there were some movements by FDA and some actions by them that basically would have kept many of these supplements off the market as unapproved drugs. So access by consumers to these products was a key issue of DSHEA, and also Health and Education Act, the idea of communicating to consumers from an educational perspective what the potential benefits and what the actually documented benefits of these products are. That became a real big part of DSHEA, and that opened it up to millions and millions of people, because this now it had safe harbor. It was legal to be able to communicate as long as you communicated directly. One of the things that concerned me back at the time, during pre-DSHEA, was based on my experience in the 1970s, late 70s and early 80s, when there was some adulteration of herbal products going on in the area of ginseng. And I was in the ginseng wholesale and herb wholesale business back in the 70s and early 80s. But my concern back at the time was that there was evidence of adulteration and fraud going on. which is not new because this is something that's been going on for thousands of years. The history of commerce and the history of society is that, in addition to many other things, people cheat. And what do you do to try to obviate that? My suggestion at the time was that if you want to make a structure function claim, a company should at least prove that the identity of the stuff that they're selling is what it is. And that way, whether the claim is based on general knowledge or traditional use or whatever, at least you know that's the right herb in the package, and it might give you, or probably will give you, this benefit as claimed by the manufacturer. That was a non-starter for many people who were involved with producing DSHEA. At that time, they didn't want any kind of requirement on that level, and I understood why. They didn't feel like that was politically something they wanted to try to carry the water on. But I was aware of some of the problems already existing in the herb industry in the 70s and 80s based on my experience, and I was concerned that there might be more adulteration going forward. Fast forward now to where are we, 2024, and we have now been running the Botanical Adulterants Prevention Program at the American Botanical Council with the American Herbal Pharmacopoeia and the National Center for Natural Products Research at the University of Mississippi, which is a Food and Drug Administration funded center of excellence for testing of herbal material and ingredients and developing analytical methods for testing these things. And we're finding that the literature is showing and lab reports are showing that there is adulteration and fraud going on in the market. No surprise. This is, again, something that's been going on for hundreds, thousands of years. What do we do to help protect responsible companies from buying adulterated material? We research the information and we educate people so that they can help ensure that the specifications that they set for these botanical materials are met by their suppliers. And so we're helping to reduce adulteration, hopefully, reduce the amount of adulterated and fraudulent material that gets into the marketplace by helping to educate responsible manufacturers and brand holders on what herbs are subject to adulteration first and how they can ensure that their laboratory testing can detect what's authentic and what's adulterated.